everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Today, we're diving into a super exciting topic, common basic verbs and their examples. You know, verbs are like the backbone of fluent conversation. They're essential. So, let's get started, shall we?
Yeah. Verbs are everywhere, right? Like, I remember when I first learned about them, it was like a light bulb moment. But wait, what's the first verb we're talking about?
Great question. The first verb is be, which is one of the most fundamental verbs in English. It's used to describe existence or identity. For example, I am a student, or she is happy today. It's like the foundation of a house without it. Everything else just falls apart.
Oh, wow. That's a really cool analogy. So, like, if I say they are in the classroom, it's kind of like saying that's where they exist at that moment, right?
Exactly. You've got it. And then we have. This verb is used to express possession. For instance, I have a new phone. It's like saying, this phone is part of my life now.
I see. So it's like when I say, I have a pet iguana. It's not just about owning it, but it's also about the relationship, right?
Absolutely! That's a perfect example. Now let's move on to go. This verb is all about movement. For example, I go to school every day. It's about the journey, the action of moving from one place to another.
Oh, that's interesting. So if I say, let's go to the park, it's like inviting someone to join me on an adventure. Speaking of adventures, have you ever been on a spontaneous road trip?
Haha, yes! I once took a road trip with friends and we ended up at this amazing hidden beach. It was a total surprise. But back to verbs next up is do. This one is used for actions, like I do my homework every day.
Right. So it's like the action of completing something. But what if I say, what does she do for a living? That's more about her job, right?
Exactly. You're catching on quickly. Now let's talk about make. This verb is about creating something. For instance, I make breakfast every morning. It's about the process of bringing something into existence.
Oh, I love that. So if I say she makes beautiful cakes, it's like she's creating joy through her baking. Speaking of which, I once tried to bake a cake, and it turned into a total disaster.
Haha, we've all been there. Baking can be tricky. Now, let's move on to take. This verb is about receiving or using something. For example, I take the bus to work.
So it's like the action of using a mode of transportation. But what if I say, let's take a break? That's more about pausing, right?
Exactly. You're really getting the hang of this. Now, let's discuss get. This verb can mean to receive or to understand. For instance, I get up at 7 a.m.
Oh, so it's like the action of waking up. But what about when I say she gets nervous before tests? That's more about feelings, right?
Yes, you're making great connections. Now let's talk about give. This verb is about providing something to someone else. For example, I give presents to my friends.
Oh, that's sweet. So it's like sharing joy with others. I remember giving my friend a surprise gift for her birthday, and her reaction was priceless.
That's a wonderful memory. Now let's move on to come. This verb is about movement towards a place. For instance, come here, please.
Right. So it's like inviting someone to join you. But what if I say, when will they come back? That's more about returning, right?
Exactly. You're really grasping these concepts. Now let's discuss say. This verb is about expressing something verbally. For example, what did you say?
So it's all about communication. I remember a time when I misheard someone and it led to a hilarious misunderstanding.
Those moments can be so funny. Now, let's move on to tell. This verb is about conveying information. For instance, tell me the truth.
Oh, so it's like sharing secrets. I love telling stories, especially the ones that make people laugh.
That's fantastic. Now let's talk about work. This verb is about effort and productivity. For example, I work in a bank.
Right. So it's like the action of doing a job. But what if I say, they worked until midnight? That's about dedication, right?
Exactly. You're really nailing this. Now, let's discuss know. This verb is about awareness or understanding. For instance, I know the answer.
So it's like having knowledge. I remember when I finally understood a tough math problem, it felt like a huge victory.
Those moments are the best. Now, let's move on to think. This verb is about mental processes. For example, I think you're right.
Oh, so it's like forming an opinion. I often find myself overthinking things, like what to wear for an event.
Ha! That's relatable. Now let's talk about feel. This verb is about emotions. For instance, I feel tired today.
Right. So it's all about expressing how we're doing emotionally. I remember feeling so excited before a big trip.
Those feelings are so powerful. Now let's discuss want. This verb is about desire. For example, I want some water.
So it's like expressing a need. I often find myself wanting to travel to new places.
That's a great aspiration. Now let's move on to look. This verb is about appearance. For instance, look at this picture.
Oh, so it's like drawing attention to something. I love looking at old photos. They bring back so many memories.
Exactly. Now let's talk about see. This verb is about perception. For example, I see what you mean.
Right. So it's about understanding visually. I once saw a breathtaking sunset that I'll never forget.
Those moments are magical. Now let's discuss find. This verb is about discovering something. For instance, I can't find my keys.
So it's like the action of searching. I remember losing my wallet once, and it was such a panic.
Those situations can be stressful. Now, let's move on to like. This verb is about preference. For example, I like ice cream.
Oh, who doesn't love ice cream? It's like a universal favorite.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about need. This verb is about necessity. For instance, I need your help.
Right. So it's about asking for support. I often need help when I'm trying to fix things around the house.
Those moments can be so helpful. Now, let's discuss ask. This verb is about requesting information. For example, I asked a question.
So it's like seeking answers. I remember asking a teacher for help, and it made all the difference.
Exactly. Now, let's move on to put. This verb is about placement. For instance, put it on the table.
Oh, so it's about where to position something. I often find myself putting things in the wrong place.
Haha, we've all been there. Now, let's talk about mean. This verb is about intention. For example, what does this word mean?
Right. So it's about understanding the significance. I love learning new words. It's like unlocking a treasure.
That's a great way to look at it. Now, let's discuss keep. This verb is about maintaining. For instance, keep quiet, please.
So it's about preserving something. I try to keep my workspace organized, but it can be a challenge.
Those challenges are real. Now, let's move on to let. This verb is about permission. For example, let me help you.
Oh, so it's about offering assistance. I love letting my friends know I'm there for them.
That's wonderful! Now, let's talk about begin. This verb is about starting something. For instance, when does class begin?
Right. So it's about the initiation of an action. I remember the excitement of starting a new project.
Those moments are thrilling. Now let's discuss seem. This verb is about perception. For example, it seems difficult.
So it's about how things appear. I often think things seem harder than they actually are.
Exactly. Now let's move on to help. This verb is about assistance. For instance, can you help me?
Oh, so it's about offering support. I love helping others. It's so rewarding.
That's a beautiful sentiment. Now let's talk about talk. This verb is about communication. For example, let's talk about it.
Right. So it's about sharing thoughts. I love having deep conversations with friends.
Those conversations can be so enriching. Now let's discuss turn. This verb is about changing direction. For instance, turn left at the corner.
So it's about navigating. I once got lost because I didn't turn at the right street.
Those moments can be quite the adventure. Now, let's move on to show. This verb is about demonstrating. For example, show me how to do it.
Oh, so it's about teaching. I love showing my friends new skills.
That's fantastic. Now let's talk about hear. This verb is about auditory perception. For instance, I can hear music.
Right. So it's about listening. I love hearing live music. It's such a vibe.
Absolutely. Now let's discuss play. This verb is about engaging in activities. For example, I play piano.
So it's about enjoying hobbies. I love playing games with friends. It's always a blast.
Those moments are so much fun. Now let's move on to run. This verb is about movement at speed. For instance, I run every morning.
Oh, so it's about exercise. I once tried to run a marathon and it was such a challenge.
That's impressive. Now let's talk about move. This verb is about changing position. For example, don't move, please.
Right. So it's about shifting. I remember moving houses. It was such a big task.
Those experiences can be quite the adventure. Now, let's discuss live. This verb is about existence. For instance, I live in Taipei.
So it's about where we call home. I love exploring new places to live.
That's a great mindset. Now, let's move on to believe. This verb is about faith or conviction. For example, I believe in you.
Oh, so it's about support. I love believing in my friends' dreams.
That's beautiful. Now, let's talk about bring. This verb is about carrying something to a place. For instance, bring your book tomorrow.
Right. So it's about preparation. I always try to bring snacks to gatherings.
Those snacks are always appreciated. Now let's discuss happen. This verb is about occurrence. For example, what happened here?
So it's about events. I love hearing about unexpected happenings.
Those stories can be so captivating. Now, let's move on to write. This verb is about composing text. For instance, I write in my diary daily.
Oh, so it's about expression. I love writing stories. It's like creating a whole new world.
That's a wonderful way to express yourself. Now, let's talk about sit. This verb is about positioning oneself. For example, sit down, please.
Right. So it's about comfort. I love sitting by the fireplace with a good book.
Those moments are so cozy. Now, let's discuss stand. This verb is about being upright. For instance, stand up straight.
So it's about posture. I often remind myself to stand tall and confident.
That's a great mindset. Now, let's move on to lose. This verb is about misplacing something. For example, don't lose your key.
Oh, so it's about being careful. I once lost my phone at a concert and it was such a panic.
Those situations can be stressful. Now, let's talk about pay. This verb is about giving money. For instance, pay attention, please.
Right. So it's about focus. I always try to pay attention during important meetings.
That's a great habit. Now, let's discuss meet. This verb is about coming together. For example, let's meet tomorrow.
So it's about connection. I love meeting new people. It's always an adventure.
Those connections can be so enriching. Now, let's move on to include. This verb is about comprising something. For instance, does this include tax?
Oh, so it's about details. I always check if things are included in prices.
That's a smart approach. Now, let's talk about continue. This verb is about persistence. For example, continue your work.
Right. So it's about not giving up. I always try to continue pushing through challenges.
That's a great mindset. Now, let's discuss set. This verb is about placing something. For instance, set the table, please.
So it's about preparation. I love setting up for dinner parties. It's so much fun.
Those gatherings can be so enjoyable. Now, let's move on to learn. This verb is about acquiring knowledge. For example, I learn English every day.
Oh, so it's about growth. I love learning new skills. It's like unlocking new levels in a game.
That's a fantastic analogy. Now, let's talk about change. This verb is about transformation. For instance, change your clothes.
Right. So it's about adapting. I love changing my hairstyle. It's like a fresh start.
Those changes can be so refreshing. Now let's discuss lead. This verb is about guiding. For example, who will lead the team?
So it's about responsibility. I love taking the lead on projects. It's so rewarding.
That's a great quality. Now, let's move on to understand. This verb is about comprehension. For instance, I understand now.
Oh, so it's about clarity. I love when things finally click. It's such a satisfying feeling.
Those moments are the best. Now, let's talk about watch. This verb is about observing. For example, watch this movie.
Right. So it's about entertainment. I love watching documentaries. They're so informative.
Absolutely. Now, let's discuss follow. This verb is about adhering to something. For instance, follow me, please.
So it's about guidance. I love following my passions. It leads to amazing experiences.
That's a great perspective. Now, let's move on to stop. This verb is about ceasing an action. For example, stop talking, please.
Oh, so it's about pausing. I often need to remind myself to stop and take a breath.
That's a valuable reminder. Now, let's talk about create. This verb is about bringing something into existence. For instance, let's create something new.
Right. So it's about innovation. I love creating art. It's such a fulfilling process.
That's wonderful. I hope everyone can remember these verbs and examples. That's all for today's episode. Thank you all for tuning in.
This was so much fun. I learned a lot about verbs today.
Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and keep learning with us. See you next time.
Bye-bye. I can't wait for the next episode.